I'm excited about this one, you guys. I love the table. One of Canada's gifts to me and to our family actually was that we spent the first 2 years serving at Barnabas Landing, and that place has really lived out the DNA of Rob and Kathy Bentle, specifically Kathy, who is a master. She's not here today, they're away for a few weeks. But they're a master of gathering people around tables, because tables are where exceptional things happen. I don't know if you've noticed that when you have a meal with somebody, your relationship shifts. You've taken time. So we're going to kind of explore that today. But I want to start with a confession. Always said that's good for the soul. And the confession, which isn't a very shocking one, is this: that I miss the UK, where I come from. Some days more than others. Jen is nodding. Sometimes I feel homesick, not just for particular people, though I do. And I'm delighted to tell you, by the way, that Dad has booked to come out to be with us over Christmas, so you haven't seen the last of him. So Dad. But I don't just feel homesick for specific people, I feel homesick for the Englishness of England, which is different from what Downton Abbey would have you think it is. We went to watch Downton Abbey, the grand finale, with some relief that they'd finally finished. And don't get me wrong, I love Canada, and I'm so grateful to be here, but I still miss what I guess I say in my language is home, even though this is my home. You know, you can have home in different places. So when that homesick feeling comes, this is kind of the guilty secret. I sometimes watch a little show on the BBC called Ambulance. Has anyone seen Ambulance on the BBC? Yes, one person. All right. Well, then there's a feast waiting for the rest of you. It's a real life series that follows paramedic crews as they attend emergency calls around the UK. Everything from elderly folks who have fallen. It's a really big issue. To serious car crashes, heart attacks in progress, babies that can't breathe, all kinds of things. Now, that may sound like a very odd cure for homesickness, but what I've realized is that I love the show because it really isn't about the illness or about the medicine. I think it's become extremely popular back home because it's a rare window into the lives of ordinary people. People just like you and me, but in their moment of real need and vulnerability. And what happens when you have real need and vulnerability is that all of that stuff around pretense and putting on a face, that goes out the window really quick. Have you noticed that? And there's a sort of honesty that the situation demands of you. No showing off, no pretense, just real people helping each other in the context of a crisis. I would actually say it's often people at their very best, despite the worst of circumstances. And I think because we don't see very much of that today, and certainly not on our TV screens, there's a lot of pretense and posturing. There's something very comforting about that show, and the fact that it's lived out in different bits. Each season is in a different part of the UK. So where Lisa comes from, Lancashire, they did a whole series from the northwest of England, and it was wonderful. And then we went back to London, they all talked like this. Emergency, is the patient breathing? You know, those sorts of things. And you go around the UK, it was a brilliant show. But here's something that really struck me about it recently. This particular show has been running for many years now. It started way before the pandemic. So, as I invite you to join me in watching all 14 seasons, and I have, one thing becomes more apparent, because what you see also is how the needs of my country change over time. It's really interesting. And one theme that came out was the ambulance crews were getting more and more calls to check on somebody with chest pain, or who'd had a fall, or some other sort of emergency presentation symptom. But when the crew arrived and started doing their checks and their ECGs and their blood pressure monitoring, the person would say often something like this: "You know what? I'm fine, really. I just needed somebody to talk to." And so, and I didn't realize this was part of a paramedic's job, that the crew would then take time to sit. And then they'd say things like, this is very British, "Would you like a cup of tea?" And the answer 9.9 times out of 10 is yes. And so the crew member would go off into the kitchen and find some milk and some, because we always have milk and tea, yeah. And they'd make a cup of tea and they'd sit and have tea together. They'd kind of gather around a table and just listen. It turns out that the real emergency that is emerging, yes, it's heart attacks and yes, it's all these other things, but the emergency which was located in deep aching loneliness. Mother Teresa is reported to have said this, quote, "The greatest disease in the West today is not tuberculosis or leprosy. It's being unwanted, unloved, and uncared for." And it turns out that she's right. I did research on this with Statistics Canada. And it turns out researchers have been monitoring and measuring and trying to understand the cause and impact of loneliness on society. And according to Statistics Canada, 1 in 8 people today in Canada say they are always or often feeling lonely. 1 in 8 people. So think about that for a moment. If there are 80 of us here today, which is roughly what we get on a Sunday morning, that means 8 people in this congregation statistically feel often or always lonely. This is a problem that doesn't exist just out there. It finds its way in here. Now, of course, loneliness figures, as we know, and you could kind of guess this, peak extravagantly during the pandemic because we were all forced into loneliness and lockdown. Is that the longitudinal studies done on this show that the problem doesn't go away. The blip has kind of rectified itself, but still, as of the first quarter of 2024, the most recent study I could find, 1 in 8 people are still reporting often or always being lonely. And what's also interesting is that if you look at this data across a population sample from young adults through to very elderly people, you will find that young adults in the age bracket of 15 to 24, that presentation of loneliness is even higher, 1 in 4. 1 in 4. That's a whole generation of people connected every minute of the day through their devices and still feeling terribly alone. And at the other end of life, it shows up again, and again, this probably isn't a surprise, and maybe some of you know this firsthand. Many older Canadians, especially those who have lost somebody or who live alone, feel that same emptiness most days. So the ache in our community bookends the young and the old. But really, across all of it, everyone is longing to belong. The other thing that the research shows us, I just share this with you because it's interesting, is that loneliness isn't just about a way that we feel. It has a huge impact on our physical health. Some of you will know these statistics and a lot more, but here's just a sampling of them. They say that over time can harm your health as much as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's one of the headline statistics that researchers have come up with. Some studies across the US have shown that it can raise your risk of heart disease by as much as 29%, or your risk of stroke by as much as 32%. Loneliness can do that. Isn't that shocking? So maybe this lonely ache is trying to tell us something. Perhaps the impact and the feeling isn't an aberration. Maybe it's our bodies acting as they should by telling us something is not right. That we've lost something that we were made for. And so instead of talking about this, I wanted to show you something, because it kind of, sometimes they say a picture paints 1,000 words. And I want to show you a short film. I've shown you this before, but it's so good, I think it bears a repetition, if that's all right. It's a President's Choice grocery advert from about 10, 15 years ago. And it's about a woman who decides that she's tired of being and eating alone. And so she sets a table in the hallway of her apartment building. We'll see what happens next. Thank you, Jim. Cut it off before the President's Choice logo. Wasn't that good? Do you remember that on your TVs? No. Makes you want to go to President's Choice. But I remember the first time I saw that, and here. There's something in me that went, yes. The moment the door opens and then another, and then suddenly this kind of lonely strip light hallway, which is just such an image of the loneliness epidemic, gets transformed and into a feast. And it's interesting, there's no sermon, there's no slogans, there's no planning committee, just one person deciding that connection may still be possible and taking a risk to feel foolish. Because of course the risk was that people could say no. And because it's an advert, they said yes. But I was wondering, what if this was more of a parable than a commercial? Jim, I've just remembered, I would love to have the handheld wireless mic as well. Would that be possible just while I'm going on here? You could bring that down, thank you. Because a parable reveals something fundamental, that we were made for relationships. Life isn't meant to be lived alone. And I think that's why loneliness hits us so hard, both in how we feel and how our bodies are. And there's this line. Thank you, Kathy. There's this line in the book, the Hebrews in the New Testament, that you'll know if you've been around the Bible any length of time. And it says, "Don't give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing." Now, I used to hear that as, "Don't skip church." But lately, I kind of wonder, what if that wasn't the totality of what the Hebrews writer meant at all? Because it also struck me that whoever wrote Hebrews wouldn't have recognized what we call church. If they just turned up today, this would be very unusual to them, very alien. I was going to say sitting in rows. Well, we're not doing that today. Or this a polished service. And I'm not knocking those things in and of themselves. I'm just saying, I think if we look back to Acts and that window it gets us into the way the early church met and operated and did life together, don't give up meeting together was just as much about don't stop gathering in homes. Don't stop meeting around tables. Don't stop sharing food and breaking bread together around those tables. And as you eat, don't stop sharing stories and sharing needs and longings and your testimony of what Jesus has done or what you'd love him to still do. Don't stop remembering Jesus as you meet. Don't stop sharing a longing, if you dare, that you still wish God's Holy Spirit would move more here than he seems to have done yet. It was all about, in those days, I think, the look of faces and the knowledge of names and the smell of bread and the sound of laughter and singing. Don't give up meeting, as some have been in the habit of doing. Maybe that's what the writer meant. Keep setting the table. Don't give up on each other. Don't lose the habit of coming together in a world that prizes individualism so highly that it is of table life. Because this is important, I think, because the table, I believe, more and more is where worship begins, where memory of what God has done is renewed and refreshed, where community and people find healing. And I think it's also around these tables that hope starts to grow. Sadly, there's not the same statistical analysis of what happens when people are in a community that make regular practice of being together around tables. But I bet you would see those statistics of heart disease and stroke and other things drop. In fact, I haven't written this in my notes here, but I remember a story not very long ago of a daycare in the States who had the lease on their property had run out and they needed to find a new place to, was it that? No. They'd grown, that's right. The need for daycare had grown and they needed to find extra space. And they didn't know where to find it, and they noticed that next door to them was an old people's home, sort of sheltered accommodation. And so they hatched this plan to see what would happen if they could mix the little ones and the very old ones, the bookends of our population. And initially they sold it to the folks in the old people's home as being, we've got this need, our neighbors have needs, we're going to let them use a lounge. You're welcome to walk through, but just so you know, there's going to be some little ones around. It's just a thing, you'll get used to it. And so these little people started to show up, age 2, age 3, age 4, age 5. And what happened over time was that these older folks would find reason to suddenly be in that room at a certain time. And then they'd be invited to do reading with the little ones or share stories. Have you heard this story? And over time, this became an absolute highlight. The little ones loved being with what was essentially a whole load more grannies and grandpas. And the older folks loved the life and the vivacity and the wonder of little ones. And what happened was this daycare found a reason to bring them together. And what happened when that happened, amongst other things, not only did the young ones get looked after well, but the medical side of the old people's home reported that their drug dependency decreased over time because they had spent time with little ones. It's a really powerful thing. What we are doing here today, I think, has the potential to change the world. I don't know if you've ever thought of tables like that. So could it be that the answer to so many of the world's wounds that we kind of lifted up to the Lord in our prayer time, the loneliness, the hatred, the division, the sickness even, is sometimes as simple and as sacred as learning how to gather around a table and eat and speak and worship together? Could that be one of the ways the Lord is going to save the world? Maybe that's why the table is such a significant idea in the Bible. It's one of those golden threads that weaves itself from the beginning to the end of the story. So what I want to do as we come to the end here is tug on that thread a little bit. We're not going to see every example of it, but we want to see how the thread of this table ministry, this way of doing life around a table, starts at the beginning and goes all the way through right to the end. So as has been my wont in recent days, and nobody's complained yet, so I'm just keeping going with it, is I've got readings, and I'm not going to read them, you are. So I want somebody to put their hand up on this table. Pauline, well done. And when we're ready, would you do that, my love? Okay. So here's our first reading. Need to get your glass. Sorry. If you need glasses, get your glasses. Okay, you can go next. How's that? All right, you can do Exodus. Oh, there you go. We'll come to that in just a second.
You want me to read it? Okay, I do have a big voice. That's not hard, as my husband would say. Okay.
Can you stand up and broadcast? So just give us the verse reference and go for it.
Genesis 1, verse 29, and Genesis 2, verse 9, the NIV. Then God said, I gave you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. The Lord God made all kinds of trees grow out of the ground, trees that were pleasing to the eye and good for food.
Very good. Have you ever thought of the Garden of Eden? Oh, there's my battery. Have you ever thought of the Garden of Eden as the original table that was already set before you had to do anything? Thanks, Jim. Just at the top. I'll get complaints about not being able to be heard if we don't sort this out. So there we go. Wonderful. Thank you, sir. That works. Okay, good. Thanks, Pauline. So yeah, the table is set, first of all, right at the beginning of our story. Trees, I don't know if you try it, how good your imagination is, but try and picture it. Trees heavy with fruit. Have you been to an orchard in the Okanagan with heavy fruit? But imagine that with every variety of fruit available. Imagine the smell of the earth and the warmth of the sun and everything that we needed waiting for us. And what's just because the fall happens, it doesn't mean the table goes away. So listen to what happens next. Read a number. Please, if you could speak into this microphone. Nice. Oh, shout if you can't get it. That's okay. Maybe it's not working.
Reading number 2,
Yep.
The Table in the Wilderness, Exodus 16:4, verse 12, NIV. Then the Lord said to Moses, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God.
Can you switch that mic off? Good. Okay. So, even in the desert, can you hear me? There we go. Even in the desert, God sets the table for his people. Can you imagine it? Bread descending from the sky outside your tent every morning. It's kind of like turning up at Arliss Peters at 9 a.m. If you haven't done that, you should try it. The smell of bread, right? And then quail at dusk. He provides, meat for them and bread. Daily reminders that God has got this. And the table becomes a way to build your trust in God, who will provide all that you need. And what was interesting was it was a table of trust. It was a lesson in trust because he only ever gave them just enough for the day. And he said, don't stockpile, because stockpiling shows that you're fearful of tomorrow. And there's no need to be afraid. So that was the second table, which brings us to another table. Who's got reading number 3? Is that you, Kelly? All right. This is a good one. This is the table in the Psalms.
Thank you. Psalm 23, verse 5. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows.
Can you turn that mic off and just keep holding it for me? The psalmist is writing that even in the midst of real threat from enemies, it's kind of interesting, God doesn't whisk him away from the enemies. He sets a banquet table for him in the presence of his enemies. Isn't that a bold and wonderful picture of God saying, I've got this, and you're going to do just fine? And then centuries later, as Nancy's going to read to us in just a second, this table then moves into the streets of Galilee.
Luke 5:29-30, 7:34, 15, verse 2. Then Levi held a great banquet for Jesus at his house, and a large crowd of tax collectors and others were eating with them. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law who belonged to their sect complained to his disciples, Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners? The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and you say, Here is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners? But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.
Can you hear the consternation in the religious elite? Jesus doesn't build up a stage or some kind of ornate presentation. He pulls up a chair. He eats his way. I've never thought of it this way, but until this week, he eats his way through the Gospels. He heals over meals. He forgives over bread, showing us what God's kingdom doesn't just look or sound like, but what it tastes like. Which leads us then, as you know well, to one particular table on one particular night. Angela, would you read this? Can we grab that mic?
Reading 5, the table of remembrance. Luke 22, verse 19. And he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and gave it to them, saying, This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me.
And in this moment, the table that we've seen throughout Scripture, my goodness, we've done a very quick whistle-stop tour. He lifts up to being something eternal. Keep doing this, he says. Keep meeting, not just the Hebrews writer, but Jesus himself. Keep doing this. Make this one of your ways of life. Gather, don't stop. Don't stop breaking bread. Pour out wine and drink. And as you do these things that you do every day, because that's what they did every day, remember Jesus' sacrifice that makes life with each other possible. And look ahead. Do you remember he says, keep doing this until what? Until I come again. So let's tug on that thread one last time, because the last table is the table that's still to come.
Revelations 19:9. Then the angel said to me, write this, blessed are those who are invited to the wedding supper of the Lamb. And he added, these are the true words of God.
You hear me? The Bible's story ends as it began, with the table overflowing. Have you noticed that? The Garden of Eden and at the beginning, and the wedding supper of the Lamb. Just imagine it. Banqueting tables where every tribe and every nation are seated in all of their resplendent glory and variety and texture, but all coming because they have welcomed the light of the one who made it possible. And as they sit, they're celebrating because every tear has finally been wiped away. And then the banquet begins, and it never ends. Isn't that something to look forward to? So what does this mean for us? Well, what if gathering at tables is more mighty and more essential than we ever realized? What if God has been saying all along to his people, come, sit, eat, be whole again? What if gathering around the table has been the plan all along? I think that's why it's sad that somewhere along the way, we, not just you guys and me, but just Christians generally, kind of develop, and we'd call this bit the service, and then on the rare occasion we'd have a potluck lunch, we'd say, oh, that's lunch. This is the holy bit, that's the feeding bit, but the two are not the same thing. But in the story we've just traced, do you notice how there is no divide? Worship doesn't end when the songs stop or the blessing is given. It carries on when we sit down together, pass out bread, pour coffee, and see one another more truly. I really believe that any table where people gather in Jesus' name becomes a place of worship. Our worship continues as we eat, drink, and chat together. It's a place to remember, look back. Jesus told us to do that. To rejoice at what's gone on, and then to look forward at what is still to come. A place to connect, to look forward to the feast still to come, a place that drives back the curse of loneliness. So although this is the end of my sermon, you'll be relieved to hear we're not going to end our service now. I should have given the ladies of the kitchen warning that we're now ready for lunch. And what we're going to do is we're just going to move deeper into our service together. It's just that this bit of the service is the bit where we get to eat and drink. I hope that's okay. If that feels weird to you, that's all right too, because this isn't normal. I just think it should be normal. And so I'd love us to try it. Just try it out. And we're going to get ready to gather around these tables and eat together. And we'll close the service formally once our lunch is done. That's what I'd like to try this week. It's not too revolutionary, I hope, but that's what I'd like to do. So we're going to eat, and then we're going to sing a song of blessing at the end, and then go on our way.